Joining me now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. He is on the Judiciary Committee. Senator Whitehouse, thank you very much for being with us. And we should also say that the leading contender, all reporting says, is Judge Amy Coney Barrett, who's an appellate judge. So my question to you is, to what extent will you, as a Democrat on this committee, participate in these hearings that will be scheduled for next month?
I expect to participate. I don't know of any decision that we've taken not to. And I think participating gives us a chance to make some very important points about what's going on around here with these judicial nominations. As you know, there's a lot of very weird behavior happening, and we haven't focused enough on the why of all that weird behavior.
What do you mean?
Well, the elimination of legislation in the Senate for basically an entire Congress, that's pretty weird. The smashing through of all sorts of norms and traditions and rules of the Senate, that's pretty weird. The hypocritical reversal of a full 180, really, on whether you should be filling Supreme Court seats immediately prior to an election, that's a little weird. And all my Republican colleagues coming out to support a nominee before the nominee has been named, that's all a little bit weird. And the press has covered the who and the what and the where and the when pretty well, but there's been precious little look at the why. And if you look at the why, you get a whole second section of who, what, where, when questions about how the money flows and what these groups are doing and who gives $17 million donations to the scheme and all of those questions that we have a chance to drill into.
And you say you will talk about that in whatever hearing we get in a couple weeks. Judge Amy Coney Barrett, you voted against her when she was up for confirmation for the appellate court. What do you plan to ask if she is the nominee?
Oh, no, I don't give away my questions in advance. But I think it is important to continue to focus on this question of whether these people are being brought on to be judges to provide fair and impartial justice, or whether all the filtering that they've gone through by the big donors behind the Federalist Society and the big donors behind the Digital Crisis Network and all that will be part of a plan that so far has teed up 80 partisan 5-4 decisions under Chief Justice Roberts that gave wins to big Republican donor interests. And if we've got a court that is going to be serving big Republican donor interests rather than justice, we have a real problem on our hands, and I think we need to drill into that.
The Biden campaign is trying to focus on the health care decision in the case that the Supreme Court will hear on November 10th. How important do you think that issue is, and how important will it be in the confirmation hearing?
Yeah, I think it's very salient for a lot of Americans. We just went through 200,000 deaths. We have millions of people who have been infected. We have an economy that is in upheaval, all because of a pandemic. And in the middle of a pandemic, people like to be able to know that they've got real health insurance. So the persistent Republican effort, having failed in the Congress, to throw out Obamacare in the courts and take away people's pre-existing conditions, I think is a real focus for people. It's one of those kind of gut, 2 a.m. worries that people wake up and think, oh my God, what happens if they do this? And they're out to do this, so it couldn't be more pertinent.
To what extent is the nominee's faith a factor for you?
We've gone over this in the Judiciary Committee over and over again, and I abide by what I call the robing room rule. I honestly don't care about a nominee's faith, and I don't think it's really our business. As long as they can leave their beliefs in the robing room, and when they step up on the bench, they are then judges for the law and not representatives of a particular faith or sect or cult or anything else. That's the test. And if they're so infatuated with some extremist views that they may have, who knows what religion we might see judges come before us with someday. But if they don't pass that robing room test, then I don't think they belong on the bench, because every American is entitled to go into every federal court and be treated fairly before the law, not run through some judge's personal religious screening.
I want to ask you a couple questions about news of day here. One, the FBI has put out a new warning about Russian efforts to undermine the election. We learned yesterday that the CIA put out an assessment that Vladimir Putin is probably directing the efforts to undermine Joe Biden. Now the FBI is saying that foreign actors are trying to spread false information about the integrity of the elections. They say, quote, they may spread false information in an attempt to discredit the electoral process and undermine confidence in U.S. democratic institutions. The FBI is warning the Russians are doing that.
Yep.
But all you have to do is listen to what's being said in the campaign trail. It's not just the Russians.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of false information out there, and it's one of the reasons that our major platforms need to step up and clean up their act. I mean, I sat next to Al Franken the day that he asked the telling question of Mark Zuckerberg about not realizing that something was up when they were running political ads that were paid for in rubles. So the Facebook and the other platforms have a huge cleanup job to do to try to protect us from deliberate false disinformation, much of it prompted by or spun out of Putin's shops. And at the moment, unfortunately, we have so much creepy political American dark money and disinformation that we're a little bit pinioned in our ability to combat foreign disinformation. Because if you clean up the foreign disinformation channels, now the fossil fuel industry can't do their climate change disinformation, for instance, at least not in the same way. So we've left ourselves exposed to this in ways that are wrong.
I want to ask you about something the president said, and let me preface this by saying that first-generation Americans, new immigrants to America, this is their country. Our country is for anyone who is an American, no matter where they were born. Now, that said, the president continued persistent attacks on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who was born in Somalia but is an American citizen. I want you to hear it.
How about Omar of Minnesota? We're going to win the state of Minnesota because of her, they say. She's telling us how to run our country. How did you do where you came from? How is your country doing? She's going to tell us, she's telling us how to run our country.
What do you make of that?
Donald Trump has a taste for cruelty, and he enjoys picking on people. And the only thing as worrisome and distasteful as this president's comments in that circumstance was that roar of approval and anger and hatred from that crowd. Not a great American moment.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, we appreciate you being with us this morning.